Welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, August 17th. Brought to you by Vunabaka.com, a new surf and water-based residential community in the island of Fiji. First up, we'll take a look at significant wave heights in the North Pacific Ocean. Notice, small area of low pressure in the northern Gulf of Alaska, generating no real seas of interest. Also, seas associated with Tropical Storm Karina, barely tropical storm strength, almost south of California, tracking east, winds 35 knots, expected to grow to 45 knots over the next 5 days. Let's put this into motion, see how it plays out. Notice Karina continues east, then sort of stalls, and basically it strengthens some but is not supposed to do a whole lot, while a new tropical system forms behind it and heads north. And the combined residuals hang in this area here may be good for swell for Southern California over the long term, if one is to believe the models. Otherwise, wind swell-wise for Northern California, almost non-existent, and trade winds relative to the Hawaiian Islands are supposed to be steady, but no significant swell to result. Notice a limited tropical somewhat activity trying to push off of Japan, but nothing of any real interest because this area here is basically shut down. The suspicion is the inactive phase of the MJO is going to take over, which will sort of put a damper on tropical development in this area. Next, we take a look at the South Pacific Ocean. Notice a gale here in this area, 28-foot seas, aimed somewhat towards Tahiti. This is actually the remnants of a stronger system that was here under New Zealand on Wednesday, Thursday, and continues to sort of sputter around in this area. But mainly, the main swell producing from this system was back earlier in the week here. Up to 40-foot seas occurred. We'll get into that in a minute. Otherwise, the jet stream is actually pushing way to the south in this area. Nothing is going on here, and continued activity is expected under New Zealand, but for the most part, the jet is pushing down towards the Antarctic ice, and nothing significant is expected to make it with any veracity out into the open Pacific Ocean until perhaps later in the week. Let's go take a look at the details. We're taking a look at Southern Pacific jet stream level winds. These winds, up at about 30,000 feet jet stream level, help support the formation of storms, and when those storms do form, helps direct their track. Right now, we see, and it's the southern branch of the jet. Notice there's two jets, northern branch, southern branch. The southern branch is really one responsible for supporting all storm development. Notice it's generally weak. Winds are 90 knots or less, and it's what we call a zonal flow, moving more or less flat west-east. Only in this case, there's actually a ridge here just off of Chile pushing into Antarctica that will shut down all development in this region. Here's the only hope, and actually the jet stream is about on the same line as the Ross Ice Shelf, meaning nothing is exposed to help open waters in the Pacific to help promote storm development. Let's put this into motion. We're looking for any sort of anything that sort of smells of a trough, and here we go on Tuesday. And a trough is winds pushing to the north, bowing to the north. That helps promote a clockwise circulation at the surface or in lower levels of the atmosphere, and that is the defining feature in low pressure development, and that's what could make a storm. Anyway, right now we see the bare hint of a trough on Tuesday with 110 knot winds starting to blow up into it, and getting a little bit better organized into Wednesday there with 130 knot winds, again in this area southeast of New Zealand, but nothing real obvious. Getting better, there we go, into Thursday now. This is looking a little bit more organized, 130, 140 knot winds, but notice it's actually pushing sort of southeast, so that would be a ridge. The trough precedes it. A little bit of hope there into Friday, and then that all washes out, and then we go up another little pocket, more zonal again this time, no real northward push to it into Sunday, and that's pretty much it. So very limited support from the upper atmosphere, but what support there is basically confined to the region southeast of New Zealand. The ridge continues here, locking down the southeast Pacific. Let's go look at the surface. So here we're looking at surface level winds, surface level pressure. It is the difference in pressure between low pressure systems and high pressure systems that generate winds, and winds of course generate seas, seas generate swell, and swell as it radiates away from the fetch, that is the winds that make the seas generate surf. Right now, a cutoff low not part of the jet stream, but sort of in between in the Netherlands, is trying to organize south of Tahiti. 35 knot winds, nothing particularly interesting in this one. And then a continued fetch under New Zealand of 35 knot winds, but notice the wind arrows all pointing into Antarctica. Not particularly impressive and certainly not good for generating swell. We roll this out, we get into Sunday night, Monday, another little pocket of 35, 40 knot winds pushing under New Zealand. Not particularly impressive. Maybe good for some sea development in this area, but nothing too much to get excited about. And that pattern continues. Notice we were talking about a trough in this area in the Monday, Tuesday time frame. And sure enough, you see some 30, 35 knot winds and aimed more northeast than southeast like they were before, but still nothing particularly well organized. And then another little pocket Thursday, getting better organized, 45 knot winds. But then falling southeast and likely over Antarctic ice, therefore no swell generation to occur. And yet another cutoff low here. Actually, let's go back and see when that guy starts. That was in about the Thursday time frame. And notice a fetch of winds blowing to the north, targeting Tahiti's right in this region. So that and Hawaii up here. So those would be the most likely targets. And there we go, 40 knot winds aim pretty well to the north. Here's a great circle paths to Hawaii. What is this? About the 181 degree path right up the paths to Hawaii. So good for some swell there. And here's yet another system out on Sunday. 45 knot winds, but again, it's right on the edge of the ice here. So I'll have to go take a look at the wave model charts to see whether it's productive or not. But this seems to be the main area right in here for the time being, at least for the next week. Now we're looking at significant wave heights, and we're actually going back in time to Tuesday night into Wednesday. Notice a gale formed then south of the Tasman Sea, 32-foot seas on Wednesday morning, building and lifting northeast a tiny area of 40-foot seas on Wednesday night. And this, relative to Hawaii, was notice here's the Great Circle cutoff for Hawaii. That is about 201 degrees, and notice the core of the 40-foot seas. We can actually, I think we can zoom in here, and here we go. And you notice that was just barely outside the swell window, the cutoff here relative to Hawaii, but in the swell window relative to California, there's 221 degrees. And so, what is that, about 220, 219 degrees for Northern California, also for Southern California. And this is the channel here that's unshadowed relative to California by Tahiti. So clearly in that unshadowed area, which is good news. And notice this, it lifts north, hugging the coast of New Zealand and unshadowed. So certainly some form of small swell will result. For California, it's mainly expected probably next weekend. Hawaii during the work week. There we go. There's Hawaii again still, and also for Tahiti starting on Monday actually. Longer period swell for Tahiti for the contest there. Anyway, roll that out. And so now we're moving into present. Notice remnants of that system here. Hanging off of New Zealand, 26-foot seas, again, sort of aimed at Hawaii and sort of aimed at California, but moving into the shadow and not so particularly interesting. Also notice a second fetch developed south of New Zealand on Friday night. Again, this was not shadowed relative to California. This is the Southern California route, 213 degrees. This is the shadow. Some of this not shadowed, but for the most part, it's all shadowed. And then relative to Hawaii, there we go. Definitely not shadowed, but aimed more east than up. You actually want these little arrows here pointing up the Great Circle paths. They're not doing that. Good for sideband swell for Hawaii. We'll roll this out. Let's get into current time and see what's going on. Now we're into current. Notice this, as we noticed before, wind pushing under New Zealand. Seas for sure, 26-foot seas. There's a little patch of 30-foot seas scheduled for Monday night. Again, let's see if we can get right in there. That maybe is, no, even that shadowed. to California, and just sideband swell relative to Hawaii, but good for a little pulse of something rideable. And then that sort of pattern continues on. We just roll this out. Nothing really solid happening, and we're into, there we go. Now here's the next cutoff low forming south of Tahiti. Actually, let's put this back. Starting about there, let's say we're into late Friday, almost a week out now. 28-foot seas. Seeing how Tahiti's so close, for sure swell for that area if this thing forms. And then yet another pocket 156 hours out here Saturday night. But again, this is that same sort of sideband pattern we've been talking about. Oops, there we go. 34-foot seas, but shadowed relative to California for sure. Not so for Hawaii, but the issue again is not aimed right up the Great Circle paths. Sideband swell or broken swell for everyone if this system forms. And oops, and there we go. And then we're pretty much done. So next, let's take a look at long-term projections. What's going on with El Nino, La Nina, Southern Oscillation Index? The values have been negative almost all month, which is a good sign. Actually, this is starting late July. We're into August. Current daily numbers, minus 1.64. The 30-day running average down to minus 7.33. This is suggestive of at least the active phase of the MJO. The 90-day running average still hovering around zero, minus 1.78, but it is creeping slowly into negative territory. If there was some sort of coupling of El Nino and the atmosphere, at some point you would expect to start seeing these numbers moving more negative. Doesn't have to be a lot negative, but at least down somewhere around -5, -6 for a 90-day average would be something that would give us hope. Here's a graph of the 30-day mean average, running average over multiple years. In July of 2012, we thought there was just an El Nino starting to get going, but sort of petered out as we got into the fall months. Then we went through what was, it was never classified really as La Nina, but certainly winter of 2013 was neutral if bordering on La Nina. Then in January, the big dip south, massive westerly wind bursts. That kind of rebounded there in the June-July time frame. But now we're back into sort of this middle negative range, which is a good place to be. If it can hold here or drop some, we'll be exactly where we need to be for an El Nino to develop. Looking now at surface, well, these are actually 850 millibar wind anomalies. Differences from normal. We want to see westerly wind anomalies. Currently, we're not seeing that. We're seeing maybe the faintest hint, a little, a couple barbs here, but then a couple barbs here pointing the other way. So basically, a neutral pattern. Oh, by the way, this is the far west Pacific. There's Australia, the Philippines here. Dateline in this region. Moving east along the equator, and all we're really interested in is, let's say, 5 degrees either side of the equator. Pretty much a neutral pattern going all the way into the Galapagos here. Here's Mexico up here. So nothing really indicative of the active phase of the MJO or El Nino from a wind perspective. Let's go take a look at the models out into the future. A week out, we're seeing maybe a couple, here again in the West Pacific, couple little east barbs. But here's the interesting part. Starting about on the dateline, notice westerly anomalies are forecast to develop. And those westerly anomalies are to hold pretty solid all the way to 140 west. So that would be a sign of what would be roughly called a westerly wind burst. But the reality is you really want the westerly wind burst to start somewhere around 140 and make it to the date line. Maybe we'll go to 170 or even 160. This is really what we call the Kelvin wave generation area. That's where if you have west anomalies and warm water in this region, it pushes that warm water to depth and then creates a Kelvin wave. Westerly anomalies south of Hawaii don't do much in terms of Kelvin wave production, but they might do a lot for tropical development. And tropical development can have its own benefits, not discounting just swell production, but they can also recurve to the north. And as these systems actually push against this flow and push over the dateline, they can create westerly wind bursts in the far western Pacific. We're not saying any of that's necessarily going to happen, but it's something to look for. Here's another look at the same sort of model. So here's time down this scale. Here is latitude. So the Pacific, the West Pacific, really starts right around here. The dateline's here, and the Galapagos are roughly here, and this is 5 degrees north and south of the equator. So what we're seeing is, in the past here, we've seen sort of easterly sorts of winds with pockets of westerly wind bursts. Nothing strong, nothing prolonged, but certainly, and in the Kelvin wave generation, I'd put a box like right in here. So there's been hints of stuff trying to happen, and then projected, here is those westerly winds east of the dateline, projected maybe 5 days to a week out, so something to look forward to. Here's the standard outgoing long wave radiation models. The orange and yellows depict what we would call the inactive phase of the MJO, or actually more surface reflectivity, that is sun reflecting off the ocean surface, suggesting high pressure, suggesting the inactive phase. So the statistic model suggests an inactive phase is in control and it's supposed to die. The dynamic model predicts the same thing, only it says the inactive phase is to build about 15 days out, so it's hard to say what's going to happen. And then we look at the upper level 40-day model. This is at the jet stream level, but it's the same sort of thing. Oranges and yellows are the inactive phase, greens are the active. Greens suggest enhanced capability for precipitation, and this is right in the, on the equator area. So what we're seeing is basically an inactive phase from now through about September 1st or so, which is a week, 2 weeks out roughly, and then a week active phase taking over for the month of September. So this model has been typically pretty unreliable in that it suggests strong inactive phases that never materialize. This model has been suggesting this for weeks now. We've yet to see it develop. If anything, some of the other models, as you saw, are suggesting westerly winds, which certainly would not be any sign of the inactive phase. So we'll see how this one plays out, see if there's any more accuracy in this model or whether this is all just a fairy tale or not. Meanwhile, what we really like is the TAO buoy array. These are buoys on the ocean surface. There's a few lines of them. They actually go north to south and at depth, and there's a stack of them here roughly on the date line right now. And they are suggesting a dead neutral wind pattern or maybe weak westerly tendencies, but weak westerly tendencies, but no strong signal as of right now. The interesting part is that one model we were looking at, the 850 millibar level, that's 4,500 feet up in the air, had been suggesting neutral anomalies, but when you actually went and looked at the TAO data, it suggests there was westerly anomalies in play. In fact, there's been a westerly wind burst going on at the surface level, and that has created a Kelvin wave, and we'll get into that in just a second, but let's go take a look at ocean surface temperature anomalies. So here's current sea surface temperature anomalies. Notice a bit of a breakup of limited cool water trying to organize. It's been coming off and on here in the Galapagos region, but actually out here this is looking much better. There was actually cool pockets developing here. They've moderated considerably. Also notice large pockets of warm water going the whole way up into central California and even up into northern California, and just generally warm water over the entire North Pacific. Also notice warm water now building here. This area has been the most perplexing area this summer in terms of cool water production, and it's been just hanging south of the equator. But now notice we're getting a little bit larger area of warm water starting to show up in this area, starting to tamp down the effects of this cool water here. So if you were looking for a traditional El Nino signal, you'd want to see warm water sort of covering all this area, and that's starting to become somewhat apparent in the faintest of senses. But there's also cool water in this region. Let's go back just a little bit and see. Notice how we had. So here was. We'll actually go back. Here was pretty much the peak of when the big Kelvin wave hit. The peak warm water warming looked pretty much like classic modest El Nino pattern, and then things started breaking up in July, middle of July. Notice that it really got pretty cool in this area. Cool anomalies, though quite warm here. And then as we started getting into August, that still continued, but then somewhere around August 11th, all of a sudden things started warming up again, and we're at current right now. Not what I'd call really warm, it's pretty weak and patchy, but considering that there's virtually no Kelvin wave impacting this area, it's holding together really well, and we're in what they call the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave, so some of this cool water is not unexpected. Zooming in, looking at high-res sea surface temperature data, certainly things are not as warm in this area as they were a month ago. Again, not unexpected, but we're not seeing as much cool water as we were seeing earlier from the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave. Things appear to have sort of settled down, and we have this what we call generally a lukewarm pattern setting up here in the Nino 1.2 region, which is okay. It's actually way better than we thought it would be given this time, given where we are in the ENSO cycle and given all the other signals that we've been seeing. Next, let's take a look at subsurface temperature anomalies. So this is the date line here. This is roughly just west of the Galapagos Islands here, and we're looking at depth down 200 meters or so. And this is actual surface temperatures. This is anomalies, differences from normal. Notice a pocket of 2-degree anomalies under the date line. Oh, notice the X's. These are the actual the buoys on the buoys are up here on the surface on the TAO array. These are sensors strung down those buoys, anchor lines, and so you get this sort of a profile of what's going on at depth. So what we have is what appears to be a weak Kelvin wave developing, migrating east. Weak 0 to half a degree anomalies, almost up to a degree, flowing the whole way into the Galapagos Islands. This is really good news because we had a pocket of cool water sitting right here totally blocking everything 2 weeks ago or so. That's completely vanished, been replaced with neutral to slightly warm water, and we have warm water developing here on the date line as a result of westerly wind bursts that occurred over the past month. Not strong ones, but enough to get something going. This warm water will build and will push east. Temperatures will probably exceed what they are here, maybe as much as twice as much when they hit the surface. So more warm water is in the pipe, is actually flowing with more warm water behind that. So this is good news. The expectation is as we go into the fall that more westerly wind bursts will occur and more warm water will build, helping fuel our an El Nino development. Here's another view, basically a modeled view of the same thing. Warm water here that's showing, this is back on August 6th, the other one was the 17th, showing a little bit larger area of 2-degree anomalies, and then tracking up into the Galapagos region. The cool pocket that we talked about is here. That has since evaporated and is not nearly as pronounced. And here is, again, this is a little bit like 165 east. So when you have westerly winds at the surface, it actually pushes warm surface water down at depth. It coagulates here into a pocket and then migrates to the east. It's about a 3-month travel time from here to here. So that means we're looking in, well, let's say it was mid-August, September, October, November-ish time frame, Kelvin wave, Halloween, let's say, hitting the Galapagos Islands. Good timing to support El Nino development. And one last look here. This is JSON2 data, sea surface height anomaly. And we're talking centimeters, 5 centimeters. All it takes is 5 to 10 centimeters of height anomaly, and that suggests warm water at depth. Warm water at depth actually causes the ocean to expand in that region and pushes the surface heights higher than normal. Notice a little pocket here just beyond the Galapagos too. A little bit of negative anomalies here over the Galapagos. That's expected. That's the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave. So again, more evidence to suggest some sort of a Kelvin wave is in development. And finally, upper ocean heat content, upper 300 meters of the ocean surface. We're back September 13. First Kelvin wave made its way. Oh, again, sorry. Here we go. Here is the East Pacific. Here, West Pacific, here's the East Pacific. So you're looking at time watching warm water migrating towards the Galapagos, then a cool pocket. This is the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave. Another Kelvin wave, downwelling phase, warmer. This was in the November-ish time frame last year, followed by yet another pocket, upwelling phase. Then the massive Kelvin wave, January, February, March, making its way across, impacting here in the May, June-ish time frame and pretty much dissipating the end of July. The cool upwelling phase, not so pronounced as compared to this one here, and yet another Kelvin wave starting to take shape in late July, early August time frame. We're expecting this one to move east as well and follow the pattern of the ones before it. If we were in La Nina, we would expect to see none of this. Easterly trades would be blowing, enhanced easterly trades, no ability to create Kelvin waves. This would all just be cold water, basically, or at least neutral water. So the pattern is pretty well established at this point. If it does not support El Nino this year, that'd actually be good. If it was just a weak warm pattern and could go for a couple of years, which sometimes that's what happens. You get this sort of false start thing. It tries to get to the threshold of being an El Nino, never quite make it, but it goes for a couple of years, and what happens is the whole atmosphere does respond in turn and sort of gives this tendency to support storm development, especially in the North Pacific in the winter. And if it does that the following summer, the South Pacific starts waking up and sort of follows the pattern. And if you get this for 2 or 3 years leapfrogging each other, then you get into a really good pattern. A lot of storms, a lot of surf. So the jury's still out on what's going to happen. The models suggest, though, that in fact El Nino is going to form this year. And here's the month-by-month forecast for the Nino 3.4 region, roughly between 120 west and 170 west. Water temperatures hitting the 1 degree above normal threshold in that region in October, peaking out at about 1.4 degrees in November, January, and then slowly sliding off. But even you're into May here, and the model suggests still 3/4 of a degree anomalies, which is not too bad of a thing. And then here's the actual chart forecast in September. Notice that it predicts warming in the classic Nino 3.4 region right in here, building into October. November, this is 1 to 2 degree anomalies. Then we're into December as well. And it looks like it's peaking out roughly in December to even in January, pretty solid, covering a good area, not particularly warm. This is about equivalent to the 2009 El Nino, 1.4 degrees. Still hanging on well into February. So, again, it's a model. Who knows how much of this is believable, but it certainly looks like a step in the right direction. So for the immediate future, we see swell generated by a small gale that was under New Zealand on Wednesday or Thursday last week. That should be pushing into California by next weekend and into Hawaii during the work week. And then perhaps continued small activity under New Zealand after that, but nothing really organized. We're kind of moving into the Netherlands territory between the end of summer, the beginning of fall. What we're really looking for is development, recurving of tropical systems in the North Pacific, going extratropical and pushing towards the U.S. West Coast. No sign of that happening immediately, but we did take a quick look at the jet stream charts, and the jet stream does look favorable. A pretty good flow running west to east at about 40 north. This is exactly what we would look for. You know, it's maybe a week or two late in developing from a El Nino year perspective, but considering it's a weak El Nino that's not fully coupled with the atmosphere yet, that's probably about right on track. So that should set us up for some decent activity into, let's say, the middle of September. And again, we want to thank our friends at VunaBaka.com. Check them out, VunaBaka.com, the new residential and surfing-based community that's being built in the island of Fiji. Tremendous project that's going on. Status can be found at their website. Take a look at it. It's quite interesting. Again, thank you. We'll do this again next week, same channel, same time. In the meantime, go get some waves. Thanks. Bye.